Hi, everybody. This is Addison Shanland, January the 11th, 2021, our first Zoom conversation for the year with our friends Vinny and Nitin in India. Hi, guys. Happy New Year.
Hello.
Hey, Addison. A very happy new year to you too.
I
Happy
trust
New
that
Year.
I trust that you're also staying healthy in the madness.
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
Good. So let's talk about India. How are we doing so far? Recovery in domestic air travel. What's happening?
Well, let me just start off with a couple of numbers. So, and then I guess I'm sure Nitin has things to add from his end. So, I mean, ever since I think we spoke last time, we're now ranging between 200 and 220 to 200 and well, we touched about 270,000 passengers a day yesterday. So, but that's still 40% below pre-COVID passenger numbers, daily passenger numbers. So we seem to be getting there, but then there's a huge variation depending on the day. So weekends are obviously a lot busier, weekdays not so much. So it remains to be seen. I mean, again, this is my observation. We seem to have plateaued with brief peaks over the weekends, where we've plateaued around the 240 odd thousand passengers a day mark. And then we have these spikes on the weekend because people are sort of traveling, which also goes to show that majority of the travel is leisure travel because of these spikes. So that's where we are. And I guess the Ministry of Civil Aviation has just recently extended the caps on fares all the way up till the end of March now. So yeah, it's interesting. Not very good for the airlines because now we're entering the quarter, which is Q4 in India and Q1 for you in the US. This is probably the quietest quarter of the year when there's no big festivals, no one really travels. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 months.
And I think just to add a bit of a personal perspective to that, on the 18th of this month, which is January, I complete a whole year of not having, stepped on a plane, which is, it's personal choice. And we've just decided to, stay around at home and be careful. As you can imagine, we've reached our wits' end, and we have planned a trip at the end of the month to, uh, for a short holiday. But at the same time, I am very, very skeptical, um, mainly because the whole atmosphere has changed. I used to fly Go Air in Go Business, which was essentially just a middle seat empty in the first two rows. That's vanished. At the same time, very ironically, when you try to look at a business class fare from Delhi to a beachy destination Goa, the fares are absolutely ridiculous. It's cheaper to fly to London at the moment than it is to Goa. So I'm very confused as to where we stand. At the same time, we have certain states who have decided that COVID-19 testing is required as a prerequisite before entry is allowed. There's certain states who don't care a hoot. So there's a lot of confusion as to what's happening. But overall, the domestic sector has you open flight radar 24 and you see how many aircraft are flying, and that's very promising.
Yeah. And just the only one thing to add to that is the COVID numbers. We're now averaging about 19, 20,000 positive cases a day. Now we're down to this number from, well, we almost were about to reach 100,000 cases a day. So given the falling number of cases and also behavioral fatigue, where people are just sick of sitting at home, so they will, like, for example, Nitin, he will probably get on a plane and go to a holiday at the end of the month. So all of those things put together, well, we'll just have to sort of wait and see and maybe analyze this on our next call.
Mm, interesting. Vinny, you mentioned that you guys were down. You were at 40% of Is that what you said? 40% of.
We're doing about 60% of pre-COVID capacity.
Okay, because I saw a number this morning in some news chain that the industry is still down 70%. So that's not bad for you guys then to be at that level. You know, that's pretty robust. And as Nitin points out, when you go to something like Flight Radar, the map of India is smothered with airplanes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Even though the
that
fares
is
are that
true.
high, that's really quite remarkable.
But
Well,
then there's another. Sorry.
those are full service carrier fares in business class. Fares in general. If I fly from my home city where I am right now, it's probably 1/4 the price. But then that's low cost carrier, prices,
Right.
including the empty seat next to me. So it's strange. I don't understand where the full service carrier pricing is coming from. It's a bit ludicrous,
Right.
if you ask me.
Okay, so let's go to an item here: resumption of scheduled international operations versus air bubbles. And of course, in light of that particular item, very interesting to see Air India do this nonstop flight to San Francisco in the middle of the crisis to try something new. I'm sure that you gentlemen have something to say on that one.
I'm going to take this one first, Vin. Talking about so right from when we had the internet bubble, where Hyderabad and Bangalore in India, were the hot places for people from the Silicon Valley to be. Um, we've always had this notion in our heads that we need a non-stop flight between Bangalore and San Francisco, partially fueled by Kingfisher Airlines of the past and how Vijay Mallya used to always want to fly on this route. I think it's just Air India has grabbed the opportunity to start this flight, but I'm not trying to be Vin over here and be very skeptical, but this is not something that's, in my opinion, this is not something that's sustainable. This is, where you have nowhere else to put your aircraft. Oh, let's just fly this particular sector. I do not see this as a long-term venture, mainly because of it's common knowledge that how ultra long haul routes are not very profitable. Fine, fuel prices are low at the moment, but then this is once things open up, I don't see this flight being sustainable. But definitely a good job. It's good that Air India is focusing on things like lots of firsts. It's an all lady crew, which is fantastic, and one of the longest routes in the world. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind the ground realities of what it is.
What was the load factor on that flight? Was it just full of dignitaries?
I think it was fairly full on the way down and fairly full on the way back as well.
I think it was definitely full of fuel. That's for sure. Probably carried more than anything else. No.
Yeah.
You would need a lot of gas for that leg, that's for sure. What about other things I mean, we've spoken before about air bubbles, and that seems to be the new thing to think about in this industry, bubbles between markets.
Mhm.
I think it's again, sorry, Vin. I know you have a lot to say about this, but a good example, Addison, is the example between India and the UK. Now we all know that the United Kingdom has found this new strain which was going around in their population. So a good example of a bubble being used is India all of a sudden just disallowing all flights for 2 weeks. Was it 10 days or 2 weeks or so?
Yeah. Yeah.
And just bursting the bubble. So it's very uncharted territory, and I hold my ground when I say it's something very unknown to international law and to aviation. But at the same time, it is what's happening at the moment. It gives the parties a lot of flexibility to decide whether they want to continue or not continue. So it kind of leaves passengers in the lurk. So if I've been desperate to fly overseas, for a number of reasons, and I'm very skeptical because I may reach there and come back and be told that, oh, you must undergo mandatory institutional quarantine, and I can't afford to do that for work purposes and family purposes. So the air bubbles are, they're working well as long as they're working understated and things are going okay. But hopefully it's a temporary measure, and once we're all vaccinated, the bubble bursts.
Just before Vinny adds to that, you mentioned the key word there, vaccinated. Vinny, when you look at the situation, can you also just throw into your remarks anything around the vaccination efforts in India, because you have a ginormous population?
Well, I guess we're going to start our vaccination drive on the 16th, I think, and then we start with frontline workers and medical sort of staff getting the vaccine first in the first phase, and then people who older than the age of 50 to get it in the second phase, and so on and so forth. I mean, so my take on the vaccinations is they're not really gonna really push international travel, and you know why that is. Given that only a couple of people in a family would be able to get the vaccine at any given point in time. So let's say, for example, my mother would get a vaccine before me because she's a certain age. So we definitely can't travel together because I haven't got, we can travel together, but arrival quarantine rules for, let's say, the UK or Europe might be different for her because she's got vaccinated, and the rules might be different for me because I haven't got vaccinated. So, if a family were to travel, family holidays abroad will take a long time, at least from an India standpoint, from an India point of sale. Yes, I guess there will be nations where, look at Israel, for example, probably the first nation in the world to have the whole population vaccinated within record time. So, I mean, I guess when Israelis travel abroad, there'll be like no quarantine. We don't know. This is again uncharted territory, but there'll probably be no quarantine. You could like fly in and fly out, and everything's going to be fine. But then if I wanted to visit Israel and I haven't got vaccinated, they probably might not want me at all. And then if they do, there might be like 14 days or whatever of quarantine. Whereas my mother, who's got friends who live in Israel, once she gets vaccinated, she might be able to go and see them. So it's all, I mean, I don't really think from an India standpoint and our standpoint, travel from India abroad will still be muted because of just the way things stand.
Right. It seems obviously Israel, obviously, as you mentioned, is the exception here, and it is exceptional in what's going on there. But it appears that pretty much everywhere else, the vaccination process is a mess.
It is.
I don't know why the governments can't get this right. What is the problem?
I think, Addison, there was, I was watching one of these news channels the other day, and a surprising number of, I was talking to someone in California, and I believe they have more vaccines than the people who want to be vaccinated. So, we have in very highly educated societies, the biggest problem is people not wanting to get vaccinated because they would just like to wait and watch what happens, which is, it's understandable, but at the same time, it's not, it's just a difficult situation to be in, because on one hand you have freedom, on the other hand you have, this explosive sort of disease, which is designed to, survive and designed to hop across people on the world.
It's strange to me that anybody who has the opportunity to get the vaccine wouldn't jump at getting that vaccine. For the three of us, we all like to, in our business, we've all liked to travel. You know that once a travel bug bites, it never lets go. Never mind. There's no vaccine for the desire to travel. There's no way. Once you've seen other things and visited other places, all you want is more, because it's marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous. I shudder to think who would voluntarily not want to be vaccinated. That's crazy.
Yep.
That's like you're thirsty and you don't want to drink water. What's the matter with you?
Agreed.
Anyway, we won't digress. Let's, Nitin, you mentioned full service airlines. It's interesting when we look around the world. For example, in Europe, Wizz Air is doing well. In the States, we see people like, the LCCs are also cooking with gas, as we say. what is the future of full service airlines? Is there a future for them? I mean, you know, we've got Air India, for example, which is a nice example. There's this talk about Jet Airways 2.0, which should bring a smile to most of the listeners, because how many times have we heard that? I'm just glad it's not Kingfisher version X.
Well, you know, as far as full service carriers go, I don't understand their pricing. You know, I'm just going to touch upon a number of things. As the example I gave earlier, I would consider myself, you know, able to pay for a lot of fares, but the fares which, you know, for example, Vistara are charging on a route, they're ridiculous. I would not pay that sort of money. So I don't know who's paying that money, but I'm assuming someone is if they're charging those huge amounts of money. So that's one thing aside. Future of you know, Air India, for example, they have progressed miraculously beyond the first stage of the disinvestment by the government. So they have, you know, received bids from private parties who are interested in buying the airline. They are still in a very nascent stage where they are opening those bids and trying to see whether those bidders are eligible or not. So we are literally stuck at that point, which was supposed to be done on the 5th of January. And very cleverly, a couple of days before that, the government amended the rules and got away with that, you know, did away with that deadline. So we're waiting for that to happen. A similar story with Jet Airways. The applicant who was found to be suitable to take over the company, their resolution application essentially is a lengthy document which they have to place before the court, saying how they're going to turn around the airline and what they're going to provide. That is still pending approval before the National Company Law Tribunal in Mumbai, and that's set to be heard tomorrow. It was also set to be heard on the 1st of this month, and I believe it was adjourned to the 8th of this month. On the 8th of this month, the court, you know, issued notice to the Directorate General of Civil Aviation as well as the Ministry of Civil Aviation, wanting them to be present. You know, understanding that they are a very essential part of that whole role, because they are the ones who have to give slots back. They're the ones who have to give previous, you know, rights which Jet Airways 1.0 held. So let's see where that goes. I'm aware of former employees of Jet 1.0 being unhappy. A lot of them have filed, you know, applications before the court saying that this is rubbish, and they want, you know, just to give you an example, employees are, you know, some employees are owed between $10,000 and $15,000 as you know, salary arrears. What I believe, you know, again, this is secondhand news, that the new applicant who's won the opportunity is planning to pay some $200, $250 as to each employee. So the path forward is long and riddled with a lot of court interferences and not by the court, but by people who have the right to approach a court. But at the same time, they may cause issue. So those are my predictions for you know, the full service carriers this year.
Something that I've noticed with some interest, to talk about the Tata Group taking Air India and then merging that with Vistara. Which brand stays, and how does that work? Is there any information on that?
Well,
there's a tough one. I believe, Vin, now please correct me if I'm wrong, but under the you know, the document which is the sacred document for the disinvestment, I believe whoever buys the airline has to keep the name for a certain amount of time, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't know where that's going to end up.
Right.
Well, I guess at the outset, what must be made clear is we don't even know if the Tatas have bid for it. They, as a group, do not talk about, well, nobody really talks about any acquisitions or that they're sort of planning. There's no confirmation that they bid for it. This is all media speculation, and this has been going on for the longest time. So, I mean, I guess there's all sorts of permutations where Vistara and Air India merge, and then Air Asia India, who the Tatas have taken a majority stake in, only a week or 10 days ago from the AirAsia group. They sort of merge and they all become one big airline and everyone lives happily all together. In my opinion, that might not happen. And again, this is something that just is purely my opinion. I feel the process might not go through as planned. They would not be able to find a buyer for the airline in its current shape and form, and ultimately the airline is going to be sold in parts. And then the only people who'd be able to pick up parts would be current airlines, and it'll be sold as that. But there again, this is just conjecture at this point in time, and this is just my analysis of the situation, and I could be completely wrong. And just to add my 2 bits around full service airlines in this country, so pricing is anyway a product of demand and supply. So for a country like ours, which is predominantly sort of like, well, pretty much owned by low cost airlines, the real issue with a full service airline is to be able to get enough people to pay X amount more for every seat, where in return they would get frequent flyer miles, or they get a meal in a box, which is what you get when you fly economy in Vistara, or like maybe a drink, because the average stage length of a flight in India is about an hour and a half. So, I mean, if you were to, from wheels up to wheels down, you don't really need like a meal on a flight like that. We've got great airports. You could eat at the airport at one end, and you could literally not eat anything at all on a flight. So the full service proposition is completely hampered, because unlike the US, where you could fly from coast to coast, and that's like a 4.5, 5 hour hop where you might feel hungry. On an average stage length of an hour and a half, I mean, I go to Chandigarh all the time. That flight is about 22 minutes, of flying. The cruise altitude for that flight is about 22,000 feet, and we descend. We don't even go above that because it's such a quick flight. So it's extremely difficult for full service airlines to survive in this environment, especially when there's ruthless competition. Everyone wants to discount to fill up planes. So it's difficult. And I mean, just to sort of add to Nitin's predicament, Vistara have about, I think they've got 8 business class seats on an A320 now, which is predominantly what they fly within the country. So if you've sold your first few seats for whatever discounted price, you would want to charge an arm and length, especially if there's demand on a particular route.
Right.
So, they are to an extent a hybrid airline now, because being a full service airline, Vistara offers a light fare where you don't get miles, and it's a restricted fare. So it's extremely difficult for them, and they've lost money every single quarter for the past 6 years, and they would in all likelihood continue to lose money for the foreseeable future. So the Tatas have got deep pockets, so have Singapore Airlines. So if I say they will survive, for sure, but in what shape and form, again, we'll have to wait and see.
Okay. Gentlemen, we've had a great call today. Two quick, or I guess one from each of you. Prediction for this year. One prediction.
Do you want to go first? Let's have the positive one first, please.
Well, I predict things going back to fairly normal, not fairly normal, but close to normal by the end of the year. So we're looking at a happy Christmas. But before that, we're just going to be grappling in the dark trying to figure out how to get there.
All right, Vinny, pour some cold water on that.
So my prediction is the real predicament Indian Airlines will have is with regards to corporate/business travel. Now that's completely been changed because of COVID. I mean, I'm not talking about SMEs here. I'm really talking about corporate houses that have people traveling. Given that they've been working remotely and business has been conducted using Zoom, nobody would really want people traveling if you can save that kind of money. Google saved, I don't know, was it $1 billion or something last year by having people sit at home and not travel? So when there's that kind of money involved, that kind of those savings involved, people just won't travel. So that is why inherently all Indian airlines will be focusing on leisure travel, which is extremely price sensitive, which makes things even more difficult for full service airlines. So it's not going to be as rosy. I'm not going to predict that we'd lose an airline or two, but it's going to be extremely difficult unless and until we are able to vaccinate all of our population with it as quickly as Israel, which we know won't happen. I mean, Nitin and I we'd be lucky if we get a vaccine by Christmas this year. I mean, honestly. So, I mean, we'll have to again wait and watch.
If you're a good boy, Vinny, Santa will take care of you.
I'm sure he will. Yeah, it'll come down the drain pipe for me. I think.
We know that's not
I
happening.
don't have a chimney at home.
Guys, always fun to talk to you. Thank you so much. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
very
You
much.
take care. Bye bye.
Bye.